Well, thank you, Sadhu, for inviting me to share my experience in my walk or my journey, my moment with absolute knowing of that there is something bigger than myself that I can connect to, and I want to thank Father Noel as well for the opportunity to be able to share my testimony to the Lord. My name is Elizabeth. Um, I live in Southern California, and I have had a spiritual journey from the beginning. I guess it would always have been um, longing for that connection with my higher power. I was raised Catholic, and my mother was devout Catholic. And my father he was Jewish, and my mother he had a conversion as well. He became converted to the Catholicism path as well. And uh, it's just something that has been a part of my upbringing. But personally, I've had a kind of like a very unique life. I had one of my, I guess I've had so many. It's just, it's been, I can't, I can't say that there's just one moment that I was totally convinced. I guess every time I have been, if that makes any sense. Uh, when I was 9 years old, I had my very first spiritual experience. My father had passed away when I was really young. He passed away when I was 7, and I had my first, I guess, experience of understanding what death was, or what I was supposed to be. I was just deathly afraid of actually like going to sleep. I thought I was gonna pass away in my sleep, or I didn't know what that was. But I was definitely convinced that it was something that I didn't want. And I slept with the Bible on my chest, and I had all the, I did all these things. And I remember there was a moment after, a couple of nights of having to be in a lot of fear, a lot of fear. I had like, I guess what they call like a cognitive understanding or a knowing. It's like a pop in a way, the only way I can describe it, where I understood that I my sole purpose, my or anything I fear about God, uh, really it wasn't something that I needed to be afraid of. It was more or less that God was part of this huge experience of cosmos and light, and what I understand, that the universe to be. And uh, it chose to experience itself. God, this is my understanding. And how it did so was it expanded itself. And so it expanded into all these little lights and particles. And I knew that when that moment happened, I knew that I was part of that. And that I knew that that was part of my being, my soul. And that my whole purpose upon this planet in this lifetime was to expand my light, and to have as much experience as I possibly could, to expand that light. And it's given me a lot of like, gratitude, and a lot of like understanding and grace with when I think back at that time. I didn't quite understand all of that, but it makes more sense now. Um, that my whole being, my whole life, all my stories and everything that I've done, I've all been a part of that experience to magnify that light, and so and then I had this understanding that after I passed, or when that time came, that it was like there was no time. um it was just all at once. I don't know why, it was a moment. And I guess it was beyond space and time, I guess. And that we would all come back together to that part that which is God, in my understanding. And it just would be just the most beautiful thing to be, in that experience. It's so hard for me to be able to describe, but um that was my first experience with my understanding, with my what God was and is, and in that time in my life. Now, my Lord is a kind of a different experience too, because that was kind of like where I understood that uh without a doubt that I am forgiven. That was big for me because I had carried a lot of uh, shame around my story or just the behaviors I was. And I had a lot of addiction issues, and I had a lot of um, just failed marriages and such. And I remember I had gone to my first, it was actually my very first like conference. And I remember I had stood up for the first time, and I said that I have given my heart to my Lord. And it was the craziest thing. I didn't expect this, but like the entire room stood up, and they stood on their stood up and just cheered and celebrated. And it was, for me, it was seemed so big, and it was so magnificent that I think about, some of my happiest times, and for some reason that's the one that keeps coming up to me, and I personally, have had lots of, like, moments in my lifetime where I've made choices that weren't always the greatest choices. But, as far as my conversion, it's always been to seek the Lord. And it comes from a place that is from deep within my being. And I've always sought the Lord in even the most sordid of places, you know. And the interesting part with that is that my Lord always showed up, no matter what, and I always see him. And today I can say that my life is a little different now, because it's not about being like rescued by my Lord and saved by my Lord. It's about more about walking, walking with my Lord. It being a together thing, something that we are always in unison, or we're always doing this together. It's not coming from that place of needing to be saved anymore. So I guess that's kind of been my experience, and um, yeah.
Perhaps you could talk a little about your mother.
Oh, my mother. Hmm. Yes, and so another part of my experience has been where I had taken some time to go back home and take care of my mom. My mom has or had pardon me, advanced Alzheimer's. She had cognitive impairment mildly in the beginning. And so for the last 7 years, I took care of her. And excuse me, she she was very afraid of death herself. And it was really very quite a powerful experience to be able to be with her during that time in her life, to take care of her. And the one thing I know that I struggled with the most was, how can I keep doing this? This is like, I had the caregiver burnout, I had all of these things. And I learned, through different meditations and meetings and such that I attended, that that power that was available to take care of her wasn't from me specifically. It was, I needed to lean into my higher power. I needed to let my higher power lead me in that time. And and in that I wasn't exhausted. It wasn't as painful or as difficult. It was definitely painful, but it was different to lose her later. But I did have a beautiful experience where I got to be with her, and she had a very lucid moment where she was talking and communicating, and so bright and full of life, and telling us stories and all of these things. And then shortly thereafter, she ended up walking her walk with the Lord. And some people call it the long walk home when you have Alzheimer's or dementia. It is quite a slow process. And for me, I just, I had the great pleasure and the great honor to walk her home. And we did that together with the rosaries and all of the different prayers that we do that were in alignment with her presence, or her faith. Yeah.